Okie dokie. Brilliant. Okay, so in case you weren't sure of what you've signed up for, you are attending an online webinar looking at creating interactive evidence gap maps using EPPI-Reviewer and EPPI-Mapper. And because it's a new tool, I also decided we might have a bit of a chat today also about EPPI-Visualiser. And as I said before, thank you so much again for attending today. So my name's Mel, or Melissa, I do prefer Mel, and I'm a support officer for EPPI-Reviewer, one of our team. And I just thought a little bit about me, just so that you know who it is that's talking to you. So I used to be a high school teacher in South Australia for 10 years. I taught mostly German, but a whole range of other subjects as well. Before I moved to Germany, northern Germany, and worked at the Universität Oldenburg, where I did my PhD, and I defended that via this method actually last year, which was a little bit surreal. And following that time at Oldenburg, I then moved to the Epicenter, which is at the University College London, and that's where we have our great team there for EPPI-Reviewer. In terms of my background, I'm predominantly from a more education background. I know a lot of my colleagues are from the health sciences or health fields, but I'm from a more education background. So I've done a few reviews on student engagement and educational technology in particular. For example, the flipped learning approach. I've also been doing a lot of work synthesizing the research that's been happening during the pandemic on teaching and learning, both at the school level and in the higher education level. And so a lot of my work is more narrative, it's more qualitative, and I come at EPPI-Reviewer and all of the tools associated with it from a practitioner perspective, someone who's not necessarily super techie, but loves using it and loves different ways of applying the different tools that we have. And I really love the opportunity to talk to people about the functionality, what it can do, how it can help you, advertise the work that you do and get the research out there in different ways, perhaps than you've thought of before. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about today specifically, we're going to start off with just some basic information about what EPPI-Reviewer is, what evidence gap maps are, and what EPPI-Mapper is. And I did just want to apologise as well, because I realised that in scheduling these webinars, I did it based on a Twitter poll, which put, evidence gap maps and EPPI-Mapper as the most, kind of the most popular topic. And then our second webinar, which is in a couple of weeks' time, which is introducing EPPI-Reviewer. So it's a little bit out of sequence, but hopefully today won't be too much of a, a baptism of fire if you're a real newbie to EPPI-Reviewer. I'm going to give you some examples of interactive evidence gap maps from other organisations as well as our own. We're then going to talk about how to design your coding tool within EPPI-Reviewer so that you can produce an effective map, because there are a few little tips and tricks that you would need to know. And then we're going to look at how to generate a map using EPPI-Mapper. And you would have noticed today I sent an email around to all of you with a hands-on task for you, as well as some data to use in doing that task. And that's obviously up to you if you'd like to do it. But it's just a little hands-on activity to get you practicing using data and creating a map yourselves, which you can do in your own free time after the webinar. Following that, we're going to talk about what EPPI-Visualiser is and how you can create a web database using that tool. Then I'll give you time to ask questions, have a little discussion, or if you prefer, you can take off early, that's absolutely fine. And then following that, I'll provide some information about some other professional development opportunities that we have available in the coming month or so. All right, EPPI-Reviewer, what is it? It's an evidence synthesis software that was created to support the methodological work that we do at the Epicenter. It is web-based, which means that you don't need to download it and have it on, one device. As long as you've got an internet connection, you're able to access it from anywhere. It has been developed for all types of reviews and evidence synthesis and designed for flexibility, which means that whilst it's a really powerful tool and it can do a lot of different things, that means that there is a lot of scope for how you can go about designing your reviews or designing your work. And so sometimes, it might need a little bit more explanation of how you can best suit your project. But it helps in a number of ways. So it helps by keeping your review process explicit and replicable, enables you to keep all of your work in one place. It enables you to be able to use the same data set for multiple different types of syntheses. It enables you to help screen very large numbers of items through methods such as priority screening. You can also update your review really easily, and we do have some machine learning aspects to it. So, for example, using Microsoft Academic Graph to be able to do citation chasing, and also to automatically locate studies that are related to your items in your reviews. And that's something that I'll be talking about in a future webinar. It also allows you, as we know, we're here today, to create interactive evidence gap maps. So evidence gap maps are a visual representation of evidence or the lack of evidence that exists within a specific domain. So they often consist of a matrix of interventions on one axis and the outcomes on the other axis. And each intersection point indicates the number of corresponding records, so the number of studies at that particular cross-section of data. The number of records in each node can be broken down into categories and represented as bubbles. And then most maps will also have some other kind of filtering mechanism so that the coding and the data can be broken down further. So there are lots of different designs of evidence gap maps, and most organisations do have their own design and layout. So, for example, these are two examples from different organisations. So the top one that you can see there is from 3IE, and that's looking at energy efficiency. And the one on the bottom left-hand side is one from the Overseas Development Institute. So both evidence gap maps, but slightly different in terms of how they look. EPPI-Mapper is a tool that is freely accessible to anyone, but it does require studies to have been coded in EPPI-Reviewer first. So it was first developed by us in partnership with the Campbell collaboration and has been constantly improved and updated since early 2018. Again, designed for flexibility, so designed to be able to, help present a range of different data. And so therefore it also has a lot of different options in terms of filtering and in terms of displaying the records and for changing the appearance of each map that's created. It does allow you to have full control over the branding. So images and the way that the titles appear, the information that you provide to users about, and also the metadata that you make available to people is completely controllable by you. The thing that I think is great is that it exists as a standalone HTML file, which means that you can, if you wanted, you could produce it and then you can email it to someone and they're able to then download it to their device and have access to it offline without an internet connection. Or you can upload it onto a website and have it freely available for people as long as they have the website address. So one of the examples of an evidence gap map that was created using EPPI-Mapper, and it was, I think, created using a slightly earlier version of EPPI-Mapper, is the Campbell Mega Map of child wellbeing. And it does use much of the available functionality. So as you can see, actually, I would like to know, can you see my cursor when I point at things? Sergio?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, because otherwise I'm going to be pointing away and thinking you know what I'm pointing at. All right, so here you can see that they've designed their evidence gap map with the outcomes across the top and the interventions down on the left-hand side. Each of the rows have been then designated into these sections and subsections. So here, this is what I would call a 3-level map. So they have level 1 is the outcomes, level 2 is health impacts, and level 3 includes mortality, morbidity, and so on and so forth. And they've done 3 levels, both for the top, for the columns and for the rows. And each of this cross section of data here, so for example, this first square that we've got here in the map is a cross section of early childhood health interventions with mortality. And that data has been further segmented into the quality ratings within this cell, which you can see displayed here. So when you hover over this cell, you can see that 28 studies had low confidence, 28 medium, 16 high, and one of those included is an evidence gap map itself. You can, and that's something that in terms of segmenting the data, you don't necessarily have to have it as quality assessment. You could have it as, for example, open access. You could have it as study language, or you could choose not to have that data further segmented. You could just have it as the number of overall records for the cross-section of these two particular aspects of the studies. So in terms of the layout, at the top of the evidence gap maps, you have the menu. Then you've got the branding and the title, which is located just underneath that. There at the bottom, if you've decided to segment some of your data, you can see the legend. So anyone looking at your map will know exactly what the bubbles stand for. So there you can see the legend showing the different confidence levels. And you've also got which version of EPPI-Mapper created that particular map. Oh, hang on a minute. Sorry about that. I've suddenly got things going on. Okay, where are we? There we go. Okay, so in terms of the style of your map, you can either set the style from the beginning as that's exactly how you want your map to be, or anyone who's using your map can then choose to update it into a different style. So we have 4 different ways that the maps can be presented. My personal preference is the bubbles. I don't know why, I just think they look cool. But you could also have it so that your map is a heat map or in mosaic style, which is also quite popular. That's probably the second most popular that I see after the bubble maps. And we also have the donut style of maps. But even if you set it up in a particular style, users could then, when they're looking at it, they can go into the settings. So they go filters, and then they could change the way that the map appears themselves. You can also specify which colours you want your map to be produced in. And you can choose the colour of the rows, the column headers, as well as the individual cells. So the colours of the actual bubbles themselves. And they can be selected visually, so you can just go look in this whole array of different shades of green or blue and pick one from sight, or you could enter it manually using either a red, green, blue number or the hue, saturation, lightness. And a really good tip is if you know that you've designed a map that looks really great, you love your color choices, write down those numbers so they actually appear here. Here's the hex. A hex number, write that down so that if you need to create another map in the future using that color scheme, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. In terms of the filters that we have available with our maps, users can filter the studies based on the codes that you've already preset for them. So unless you've said that you definitely want a particular set of codes to be in these filters, then they won't appear. So the default is that the studies will be filtered using AND if you go across sections, or if you choose within a particular section, the default will be that it's ORing them. But you can also change the filtering mode at the top there, as well as easily clear the filter. Once you click within one of those cells, so at a particular cross-section of data, a references panel will open, and it looks like this, for example. It will display all of the items that match that particular cross-section of data. So say, for example, it was mortality and the, I think it was child health interventions. And this is the list showing all of the different items that were coded with both of those codes. You can also change the codes that are displayed on the left-hand side. You can also group it by option. So if you wanted to, for example, display first, you wanted to see all of the high confidence studies, for example, then you could choose to group it by segment, and it will group the studies based on the confidence level there, because you can see the colors here with these little bubbles, and that represents that segmenting data. The study information is available on the right-hand side, and the way that appears can be edited by you, both before you produce the map and also afterwards if you use a HTML editor. You, again, as I said before, you specify exactly which study data is available to people, and then that will be displayed. You can also search by, people can also search within this list of items on title, author, and abstract. And you can also have it so that, which I'm pretty sure I probably mentioned shortly, but you can also have it so people are able to export that list as a RIS file so that they could then import it into their own reference management software. In terms of that top menu, there are many options available to you. So hiding the headers there, that will hide the header area, so the area where you've got logos, the title, etc. It just makes the map appear larger on the person's screen because it takes away that branding. You can also select that it is full screen, making the browser fill up the entire screen again, just making it a little bit larger to work with. The About section is where people would be able to find more information about your evidence gap map. You might choose to include links to published articles, for example. You might want to put information about the protocol in there, anything that you want to include to give people a little bit more context about what it is they're looking at. You could pop it in there. That is optional, and if you didn't fill that information in, then it just wouldn't appear in your particular map. You can also include information for people on how they could get in touch with you to submit a study to be considered to be included in your evidence gap map. And that information, again, that's optional, but if you did put that in, it would be under this Submit a Study button here within the menu. And then the list studies in this particular map will list all of the studies that were included in this particular map, and there were 333 systematic reviews and 23 evidence and gap maps included in this particular one. And so they will be displayed then. You can also choose, should you in particular set your map up so that it does have these multiple levels to it. You can have it so that you can collapse sections and subsections. And that would just mean that if you've chosen to include a lot of information, particularly going horizontally or vertically, that people are able to then collapse a particular subsection so that they can focus on other areas of the map. And what will happen there is that the numbers will be aggregated. So if you close this particular one on health impacts, for example, all of the numbers of records that make up these particular cells will be displayed all together in this first cell here. You can also now choose, when you're first creating your map, you can choose to have it so that your map is automatically already in a collapsed state. The only thing with that, and I'll show you what I mean shortly by that, the only thing I would say about that is it does save room, but then the people, whoever's looking at your map, would have to know kind of innately how to then uncollapse all of the headers, how to get all of the sections open again. And so that is something to think about. when you're creating your map, whether or not you want people to have access to all of the information immediately, or if you want to have it as a closed map. Perhaps I will quickly show you that right now since I'm talking about it. So here's a map I created earlier. And if you chose to have it in a collapsed state, and I'll just collapse all of this here, this is how it would appear. So this map in itself isn't particularly detailed. It doesn't have many segments to it, but you can see here I've completely collapsed all of the segments and the subsections, so that it just lists the number of records in the map. So if someone were to open this map, you just need to make sure that perhaps you include some information in this about section here, just to say, you know, how to use the map, just to make sure they know how to open up these little areas here. And that's just, yeah, I just wanted to mention that before we moved on. And this is an example of a map that hasn't got any extra segmented data for each of the cells. So you can see it's just the number of records for the cross section. Okay. Another example of a map, which is actually created by the EPPI Centre in collaboration with a number of our colleagues, is the COVID-19 Living Systematic Map of Research. Now, this particular map is really large, and I'm not going to open it because version 59, which is the one before the current one, had just under 60,000 studies in it. It's been a labour of love throughout the pandemic, and it's massive. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource. This particular map has chosen to show the topics versus the date of the searches in terms of the number of records available. So each column is a topic. So for example, diagnosis, health impacts, and those are specific to a mesh term. And they've chosen also to include all of the versions in that top row, just to make it easier for people to search. So this is an example of linking the headers to a mesh term. So here we've got diagnosis. When you hover over it, you have the option to then click through and go to that mesh term. And this is what gets opened. It is fully configurable. It is optional whether or not you want to embed links within your headers, but it is available to you. Okay, this is what I mentioned earlier about exporting. So within the records panel, on the right-hand side, you do have the option to download the listed references or download a RIS file. It is optional, so you can, when you're creating your map, you can actually say specifically that you don't want people to have that capability, and then it will just not appear in the map that you create. If you click that button, it will generate a RIS formatted file of all of the listed records with whatever items are currently shown on the screen. RIS is, it's a commonly used file format and can be used generally with all reference management software, for example, EndNote or Zotero, Citavi, what have you. I think it's a great feature, but it is an optional feature. Aha, another live map example. This is the map example I just showed you in terms of another way that you can create a map. So this particular map was generated, you can see down here, it was generated using version 2.0.1 of EPPI-Mapper. And whenever you create a map, the map is created with the data at that particular snapshot in time. So in order to create the map, you needed to have exported the data from EPPI-Reviewer first. And because you're doing that, there isn't a live connection. So even if I'd exported the data yesterday, and today in my review, I went and coded some more studies, if I don't regenerate that report for the map will stay with yesterday's data. So here in my About section, I chose to include some information about how the evidence gap map was created. I've got some links to the article that it's related to. I've got information about the key research questions to do with the map, and that's all I've got included there. You do also, and I will show you this shortly, you do also have the option to embed images, You can embed videos. So you could, if you had infographics, for example, about your particular study, you could put them in there. You could have, if you've recorded a video sort of talking about your research at all, you could put that in there. Or even you could do a little sort of instructional video on how people could use the map as well. I have chosen to include instructions for submitting a study, but basically all it says is just send me an email. I haven't thought of anything more interesting than that. I wouldn't mind hearing some examples of how other people have used that particular facility. And then there is the records with all of the records currently available in that particular map as well. Okay. So I'll just take a quick sip. And remember, you can type questions in the chat and I can come back to them. Or if you've got a really, really burning question, don't hesitate to jump in. It's really important when you're designing your coding tool within EPPI-Reviewer that you think about the structure, because if you don't think about that at the beginning, the map won't necessarily generate correctly. So it's important that you know that rows and columns, they can have up to those 3 levels that I showed you before. So in this particular example on the page here, level 1 is author information, level 2 is author continent, and level 3 are the different continents. How that looks in EPPI-Reviewer is like this. So this is an example of a data extraction coding tool. It's a screenshot from within EPPI-Reviewer showing you how it looks as a coding tool. So here you can see we've got underneath data extraction, we've got the author information code, which is this one. And that is set up as a non-selectable code. And I'll explain shortly in a little detail more of what that means. Level 2 is also a non-selectable code, and that in my map is author continent. And then the level 3 codes are all selected as are all specified as selectable codes. So these are the codes that you can check, and that is the data that will then populate the map. In terms of your filters, so within the map, when people want to filter the records that you have, you can have up to 2 levels. So for example, in this particular example I've got here, I've got publication language as a filter, and I've also got whether or not the studies are available open access as a filter. And within EPPI-Reviewer, it looks like this. So we've got level 1 as a non-selectable code, publication language, and level 2 are the selectable codes that you could then choose from when you're coding your data. So how you do that within EPPI-Reviewer, and again, the people that are newbies to EPPI-Reviewer Web, I can certainly provide you with more information and come along to the next webinar, which will provide you with a little bit more information. But what you see here is the review homepage. So as soon as you log into EPPI-Reviewer Web, this is what you would see. And then you would have a little green tab on the right-hand side where you can open up your coding panel, which is what you see on the right-hand side here. I do also have an instructional video about how to edit coding tools, which you could see following the webinar as well if you want to. So in order to create a coding tool for your map, you can either click on coding tools or edit tools, then click on add coding tool. Leave the coding tool type as standard. So there are 3 different coding types you can have in EPPI-Reviewer. You can have screening, standard, or administration. Standard ones are what we use generally for things like data extraction, map coding, and quality assessment, things like that. So leave it as standard. Pop in a name for it, so data extraction or coding for map or something like that. You can also put in a description if you want to. That's completely up to you. You would, for now, it will stay in normal because we're creating a completely new coding tool. It will stay normal. If you were wanting, for some reason, to do your data extraction in comparison mode, or double coding mode, where you've got more than one reviewer doing the coding, you would need to change this. I do provide some more information on how to do that at another time. And then you click on create. Okay, so we've got here, I've created, you can see here on the screen, I've created a new coding tool and I've called it EGM, Data Extraction Coding Tool Example. So now that I've got my coding tool, I need to add the first level. So you would click on the coding tool and then you would click on Add Child. Leave the code type as not selectable, no checkbox, and type in the parent code name. So for example, author information, and then click on create. Once it's been created, it will appear underneath your data extraction coding tool, and there it is there, author information. In order to create then level 2, click on that particular code and click on Add Child. Again, you would need to leave the code type as not selectable, no checkbox, and then type in the parent code name. So for example, author continent, and then click on create. And so there you can see our new author continent code has shown up underneath the parent code. So here's level 1 and level 2. In order to find that, you would need to expand your parent code by clicking on that little black arrow there, just to open it up, and then click on Add Child. Then, in order to create that level 3, you would need to change the code type to selectable, show checkbox. So this enables that checkbox to be displayed when you're doing your coding of your data. And it does also give you the option to click on an info box and type in any extra information if you wanted to. Then type in the code name. So for example, Asia in this particular example. If you want to type in a description, you can, and then click on create. Okay, so basically, I will just say, if you wanted to have it so that you only had 2 levels, so in the example of a filter, for example, something you wanted to have for just a filter, obviously you wouldn't go through all of those 3 steps. You would just do 2 steps, 2 of the levels, so that the first level would be not selectable, and then the next one would be the selectable. Once you've set your coding tool up, you would then, if you haven't already, you would need to import your studies into EPPI-Reviewer, manage any duplicates in case you've imported studies from more than one source, and then you would need to go ahead and code them. And you'd have to do all of that before you can obviously export your data and create your map. Now, as you know, as fate would have it, today I'm not going to show you exactly how to do that, but I do have resources that you'd be able to look at if you want to on importing items, managing duplicates. And I do also have an introductory webinar to EPPI-Reviewer Web that I did last year that's available for you to look at as well. And the PowerPoint slides are there. So that if you wanted to get started before this next webinar on the 30th of June, then by all means you can do so. Okay. So in this example, let's just say we've gone ahead, you've coded all of your items within EPPI-Reviewer, everything's ready to go, and you're ready to export your data. In order to do that, you're going to need to create what's called a JSON file. And I do also have an instructional video on this particular step, and the link is at the bottom of the slide. So within EPPI-Reviewer, you would need to go to the References tab, which is the second one along here. And then you would need to click on Coding Report. Choose the coding tool that you want to export. So in our case, data extraction, interactive evidence gap map, or whatever it is that you've called your coding tool. Select the JSON report checkbox, that's really important. And then you need to choose which items you want to have the report produce. So it's up to you. You could choose to have all of the items within your review, or you could also choose to just choose a subsection of the studies within your review to create your map for, in which case you might have already just opened up which studies you wanted that to be for within your screen there. So you can either choose selected items, the items on that page, or the whole list. Then click on Get Report. Click on the Save icon and save the report to your device. It doesn't really matter where, just as long as you remember where you put it. Okay, so I'm actually going to show you that in action with some data that I've already created. So this is EPPI-Reviewer Web, and I'm going to log in. Once you log into EPPI-Reviewer Web, if you haven't used it before, you'll be taken to this, this welcome page, this introduction page here. And I'm going to click on that particular review. And so you can see here, you know, at the top, we've got the status of the items in my review. These are the items whose coding has been completed. And I'm going to choose to open up these items here, these 107. Now, because I've got 107, normally EPPI-Reviewer will display 100. With the coding report, I don't necessarily need to make it so that it will display more than 100, because if I click on coding report and coding for map, I can choose this whole list. So instead of just getting the first 100, it'll make sure it includes all of the 107. Okay, need to make sure I click on JSON report, because otherwise it won't work. I've got a message. JSON reports can be very slow to appear when using Chrome, so it won't show here. Yes, normally, just between you and I prefer to use Firefox, but I'm on a different computer at the moment for this, and so for whatever reason, I'm using Edge actually. Yeah, so if you are able to and you have the option, my advice is to use Firefox. Okay, but I've got everything. I click on Get Report, shows that it's fetching the information. Okay, don't worry about how this looks. It looks a bit crazy, but this is how it looks when it comes up. And I'm going to click on Save, and that's going to save it to my Downloads folder. All right, so now that we've got that, we're going to go to EPPI-Mapper. So this is EPPI-Mapper here. The link is here. It's also available on the slides that you can have access to following the webinar. And in the slides, I've also gone through what I'm about to show you live. I've also put it step by step so that it's you have the instructions with you. Okay, so the first step for we've come into EPPI-Reviewer, we've exported our JSON file, and just so you know, it's based on this particular coding tool here called Coding for Map. So I've set it up with a range of different codes. I've got ones that are only 2 levels. So participant focus and engagement and disengagement both have, they all have 2 levels, but I have set up study characteristics as a 3 level, 3 levels. So it's going to be, I need to remember that these are the 2 that I want to set up for my columns and my rows. Okay, so first of all, locate where you put your JSON file. Then choose your what you want shown in your columns. So I think we want to have the, let's go the outcomes in the columns, and the rows can be study characteristics. Then you need to choose whether you'd like to have your data further segmented. So segmenting attribute means, are you going to have something that's going to then further segment the data within the cells, or are you going to leave it looking like this? I think in this example, let's have a look. What have I got available to me? Okay, let's say in this example, I'm going to choose engagement. Let's see if that works. And then click continue. But if you didn't want something, if you wanted your map to appear like this, just leave that segmenting attribute blank. And then I'm going to click next. Then your option is to choose how you want your map to be shown, you know, which style it's going to show in. And I like bubble, so I'm going to start with that. If you wanted to have your map automatically displayed with collapsed headers, you would select this, but I don't want that. And then you need to choose the colors. I always like to do crazy things when I've got a webinar. So let's choose something that will be a little bit funky. There we go. Woo. Okay. Again, remember, if you find a color that you really love, write down these codes so that you can use it again. I doubt these ones are going to be those, but you know, if you liked them, write them down. Okay, the next step is to add your segments. Now you can choose to just add particular segments. So these within my engagement parent code, I had 4 codes underneath that. I had cognitive engagement, affective, behavioral, and overall engagement. Now you could choose, if you wanted to, just have it so that one of the segments was featured in your map like that, if you wanted to, or 2 of them, or however many. Or if you want all of them, you just click on Add All Children, and then that will automatically populate the segments with the first 4 codes underneath that segmented coding parent code. Okay, the next step is to decide whether or not the colors that have been chosen for your bubbles are right for you. As I said, I love to have things a little funky, so let's change it up a bit. Ooh, that's a bit weird. Yeah, why not? Except that's the same color. Oh gosh, Melissa, it doesn't really matter. Pink can clash with red. Let's go for it. Why not? Okay. If you suddenly decided, well, hang on, this particular segment isn't right for this particular map, you could choose just to get rid of it by clicking on the red trash icon. So I'm going to delete it, get rid of it, then we won't have a clash with the red ones. And then click on continue. All right, we're already halfway through creating this map. The next step is to provide the information that you wanted to have to share with people about your evidence gap map. So I might be a little cheeky and copy the information I had here before, just to save some time. And the beautiful thing that I've discovered about that is that it remembers the formatting. So if you've already gone and you wanted to create 4 different maps based on the same data, you could easily create one map and then just copy and paste it once it's been created, and it will remember the formatting, save you oodles of time. Okay, so we've got that information in there, but we do also have some really powerful editors available at the top. So if I wanted to change this, I could, oh, it's already in bold. Let's give it some italics. Let's say we wanted to highlight this particular thing and make it a different funky color. There we go. You may also want to, I don't know, you may want to put some pictures in there. If you wanted to do that, you could click on the plus icon here and you could insert an image, you could insert videos, emoticons, all kinds of weird and wacky and wonderful things. So too, you've got the same editors available for the information on submitting studies. Now this bit here is what I was referring to by this submit a study button. Now I'm going to leave this blank for this particular example so that you can see the difference in the construction of the menu area there at the top. So I'm just going to leave that blank and click on continue. Now you need to think about whether or not you want to make it available for people to be able to download the items in your map as a RIS file. Now, I do want to point out that this doesn't mean that they download the PDFs, because obviously we can't do that. What we can have within our maps is a URL link or a DOI link so that people can click on it and then be taken to the website where the study is located. But obviously, due to copyright issues, you can't actually have the PDFs there available. I'm gonna leave it there for now. Next step is to choose what filters you want people to have. Now, I don't have a lot here, so I'm going to choose, I'm going to unclick engagement, because the order that you click the filters in is the order that they'll be displayed within your map in the filter section. So I'm going to go participant focus, engagement, disengagement. Okay, the next step is to decide which meta properties you want to have. And so that's the information where, so here in this map, we've got, let's click on one here. So that's the information that will be provided here, for example. All right, so let's say authors and DOI, URL, and here, that'll do. And again, the order that you click them in is the order that they'll appear in. So if you want to, you might want to think about that before you go ahead and do it. You can also choose to remove the abstracts. So that would be removing the information provided here at the top. Completely up to you. I personally prefer to have it in just because it provides the readers with more information about the studies. But of course, if you wanted to, you could have that clicked. And then click continue. Then it comes to branding. Branding is all about this header area here. So what people are going to see at the top. Now, this particular map is not very detailed in terms of how I've branded it, but I have chosen to include these two logos as well as some text. And the way that I did that was actually to insert, first of all, a table so that I could more easily control how the logos and text were displayed on the page. So that's something else you might like to think about for your particular map. So you can also easily drag and adjust the width of the cells, again, so that you've got that full flexibility over how it's displayed. For now, I'm just going to call it my German keyboard, my crazy new map. And center. And maybe give it some bold. Why not? I'll leave it like that for now. You get the picture. I've managed to add some funky new bits. Oh, I'll leave them there. Then click continue. That is it. Now, I've taken a lot longer to create it because I've been talking through it and going back and showing you different things. But it actually really only does take 2 minutes maybe to create a map using this EPPI-Mapper. As long as you've already you already know what information you want to provide. You've already coded all of your studies. It really doesn't take long. I will just say, if you're going to be hosting your map online, you can click this button here so that it does optimize the map. But what that means is you then couldn't have it so that if someone was accessing it without an internet connection, it won't display. So I personally never click that button. I just click on download and leave it at that. So it's going to download it as a HTML file, and then you can open it up. Wow, look at that purple. Beautiful. Okay, and there's the map. I did add, for some reason, some extra lines in there, so that's why it's got such a large area. But anyway, and this is what we chose. We chose to have our outcomes and EdTech, then outcomes and different types of technology headers, followed by the selectable codes underneath that. And again, they're fully collapsible if you wanted them to be. We've got the legend down the bottom showing what the different bubbles mean, and it shows which version of EPPI-Mapper was used. You can see at the top here, there isn't that, like in this map, there isn't this submit a study button. That doesn't appear, but the about information does, including my crazy formatting, and the filters should appear, yes they do, in the exact order that I chose them in. So we've got participant focus, engagement and disengagement. So let's say, for example, I just wanted to look for studies that include parents as the participants. I could click on parents, click update. It's having a think. Automatically, the information displayed in the map will just reflect my selection. So this is showing the studies that only involve parents as participants. And then to clear that, you can just click on clear and update it again. You can also then still choose, you can change the style. Even though I said I wanted it as a bubble map, we can change it. There we go. Ooh. It does also look kind of cool. I still prefer the bubbles. And that's it. It's now available to be able to upload onto a content management system, so onto a website, or you could simply email it to someone so that they can open it up and they don't have to have an internet connection to be able to do that. Now, I've just looked at my watch and realized that time is marching on quite quickly. So I won't talk too much longer about the maps, but just so that you know, even once a map is created, if you've got some kind of HTML editing skill, you can actually do that within Notepad++, for example. Unfortunately, my skills aren't that advanced when it comes to this, so I can only be a little bit helpful. But if you have any questions on that, you can always send it through to us, through to our support email address, and we can help you. Okay, so take another sip. EPPI-Visualiser. EPPI-Visualiser is our new web database tool, which, unlike EPPI-Mapper, which only shows the data that was captured at the very moment that you exported that JSON file, EPPI-Visualiser is actually directly linked to the data in your review. So that any changes that you make in your review in EPPI-Reviewer are automatically updated live in this EPPI-Visualiser database. So I'm going to show you one that I created earlier, and here it is. So this is EPPI-Visualiser. Now this is again, it's a freely accessible tool to anyone that has an EPPI-Reviewer account. You create it from within EPPI-Reviewer itself, and I'm going to take you through how to do that shortly. But the general gist of it is that, as I said, it is a live version of your review, or a live subset of studies that you choose to make publicly accessible or not to people that have the link. So you can actually make it so that it is password protected, so that only people with a username and password can access this information. Or you can just simply share the URL that's automatically generated for you when you create it with people, with anyone. So, for example, this is a living, a systematic map of research to do with teaching and learning in higher education during the pandemic, which I'm going to make available to anyone who reads the article that just got accepted. And I'm going to share that link for this particular EPPI-Visualiser database in my article, so that people can then, anyone reading it could then come here and they can have a look at how we've coded the items. So, for example, on the left-hand side are all of your coding tools. So let's have a look. What have we got here? Participant continent. So you can look at things like frequencies. And these are all hyperlinked. So say, for example, you were really interested in looking at the research that's been happening in Africa. I could click on that bar and be taken directly to a list of those 17 records in my review. You can also choose to download these records as a RIS file or into Excel, or you could choose to click on a particular study, click on Show Coding, and all of the different codes that have been given to that particular item are shown. And what this does is take the transparency of your review to the next level, really. So that anyone that's interested in your topic can come here, see how you've coded it, and they can get perhaps a deeper insight into some of the evidence that you've managed to capture. You can also click on all records to be taken to a list of all of the items included in your review. Or if you go back to the home page, you can also do things like cross-tabulate data from here. And this is kind of like a very simplified version of a map, but using live data. So say, for example, I was wanting to look at, if I set the x-axis as participant continent, if I was wanting to look at which participants were being looked at across the different continents in this particular review, then so you click on participant focus and click on full crosstab, and that shows me that cross section of data. So looking at the continents across the top and the participants or the respondents in each of these studies down the left-hand side. Again, all hyperlinked. You can click on one of these numbers and it will be taken straight to the list of that cross section of data. So in one sense, and you can also change it to a bubble map, Bubbles aren't quite as pretty maybe as the EPPI-Mapper version, but you know, you do also get that visual evidence base using this particular tool. You've got a legend down the bottom for what it means in terms of the numbers, or you can hover over it and it will tell you exactly how many records are involved. And it also shows you where the evidence isn't. So what we found in this particular review was, you know, a lot of studies were focused on students, the student experience, less so on support staff and educators to a certain extent. Right. You can also search through the items. So say, for example, I don't know, we're going to look for, if someone was looking, I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure if this is going to come up. Okay, if Google was located in the title and abstract, there were 32 records apparently. You can also search in the abstract, just the abstracts. You could search for particular authors. You can search in just like the coded text that was coded within EPPI-Reviewer, and so on and so forth. So I think there are pluses and minuses to both. I've chosen to use both the static EPPI-Mapper evidence gap maps as well as this freely accessible version of my review, because they, in my mind, they do kind of do two different things. So getting back to my PowerPoint, how to do this. Now, I actually think it might be better if I do this live. I'm going to go through it really quickly so that you do have time to ask questions if you want to. Again, in the slides that I provide you, all of the steps are written out step by step. But to show you how easy it is to create one of these visualizations, let's go back to EPPI-Reviewer. And which review am I in? Let's see, I'm currently in, yep, I'm in the one I want to be in. Excellent. So this is my Flipped Learning Student Engagement Review, one that I did some time ago. In order to create a new visualization, you would click on this blue button next to Create Review. Now, I created one the other day, so I'm going to click on Add New. So the first thing you do is type in a name, another test, that'll do. If you want to type in a subtitle, you can at this point. And this is the subtitle, that'll do. And then you can also specify at this point whether or not you want your EPPI-Visualiser to be open access or not. So let's say you had a particular funder that wanted to have this kind of resource just available to their institution. Then you would be able to specify a username and password to lock it down. But I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it open. Then click on Save. Okay. Now, I'm going to, yep, there we go, another test. Now, it automatically assigns you a public URL, and that's it here. But we won't click on that yet because at the moment I haven't populated this particular EPPI-Viz with anything. So we're just going to edit some of the information first before we add the coding tools. So first of all, this description information here is what you would see in this introduction section. And I'm fairly certain, and Sergio, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm fairly certain the word introduction is displayed for anyone's EPPI-Visualiser.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Okay, cool. So it doesn't, even though it says description, I've got too many windows open. Even though it says description here, what it will show is introduction. So that's the part where you can put all of the information about your particular review, maybe instructions on how people could use this particular visualization, and so on and so forth. I am saving time, so I'm not going to put anything there. If you want to just have your visualizer focused on a particular subset of studies, this is where you would do that. So you would click on Add, and then you would pick the code. So for me, I might just want to include all of the studies that have include on full text applied to them. You may have, I don't know, maybe you're doing a like an update to your review and you've got an allocation code there. and you just want to focus on that particular update for this visualization, this is where you would do it. Otherwise, just leave it blank. Okay, then click on Save. We can also, I'll click on Save first. And now we can also add some images and some logos to the top of the visualization, which should be here. Now, I think because my screen is a little bit smaller, these are appearing on top of each other. But if you've got a wider screen, often they'll appear next to each other. So I haven't prepared a logo, so I'm not sure if I've got one easy here that I can add. I've got some random photos. I'm not going to bother doing that right now, but I've got instructions in my slides to show you how to do that. Really, really simple. Click on Select Files, locate the logo. It will give you a warning if the logo is going to be too big, and then you'd need to obviously change it. And then you can also repeat the step for image 2 as well. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that. Now the next step is to decide which of your coding tools you're going to display. You don't have to have so these are all my different coding tools from within this review. I don't have to have all of these. I'm just going to choose Coding for Map and click on Add, and that will be displayed. I can also choose, now that I've added it in, if I want to, I could change the name of this particular coding tool. So I'm going to change this to Data Extraction. It will not change the name of it within my review in EPPI-Reviewer. It's only going to change it for this particular visualization. I could also choose, if I wanted to delete a particular code. So let's say, for example, let's say for whatever reason, I don't want the year levels to be in this particular database. You'd click on the code and then click on the trash can. It does not delete the codes from your review in EPPI-Reviewer. I just want to make sure that's clear. It only does it for this particular visualization. Okay, so I've done that. That's all in there. Job done. Let's have a look what it looks like. And there it is. It's as simple as that. It's automatically populated with my review data. I haven't had to export any reports or anything. My coding tools are available on the left-hand side, and you can see there that year level does not appear. It's been deleted by me, but it has not been deleted from my review. The year level is still there. And it's as simple as that. And then I can share the URL, which was available here. I can share that with, oh, that's the wrong one. I can share that URL with anyone. Although they probably wouldn't want to look at this as it is at the moment, and then they'll have access to it, and it's as simple as that. So I'll click through these. As I said, I've got all of the information for you on how to do it step by step. And yeah. Once you're happy with it, simply share the link, as I said. So before I open up the floor, maybe, I might just mention that we do have a few other training webinars coming up. So there's 2 that I'm running just like this. One is in 2 weeks' time. It is Introduction to EPPI-Reviewer Web. So it's really pitched at more beginner level in terms of how to do things like importing references and double screening, you know, how to work with teams in one review, creating coding assignments and doing things like that. I'm also offering a webinar late July on how to use Microsoft Academic in EPPI-Reviewer Web. And then I'm also helping out on another course in conjunction with the University of Sheffield, and that's on the 7th of July. And that's really getting down a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of scoping reviews, mapping reviews, and evidence gap maps. So if you are interested, the links are available in the slides. And I've also put some links there to some guidance from Campbell, the Campbell collaboration for how to produce evidence gap maps, a comparison of different approaches. That's a really interesting article, as well as links to the app itself, some instructional videos, some of the resources that I've created from my own research as well, if you were interested. And my contact information is at the back, and I would always welcome you to contact me and get in touch, or contact the EPPI support team directly for any EPPI Reviewer related questions. So I will stop sharing. I know that was a lot of information, yeah, it was quite quick, and I apologise, but we've got to just under 20 minutes. If you've got any specific questions, now is the time. Otherwise, if you don't have any specific questions for me, then you are more than welcome to make the most of the rest of your lovely day. Pauline, go for it.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my mute button off. Listen, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
You're welcome.
I am wondering if you have a set of data that you've coded once and you wanted to recode it, because I usually use Tableau, and I could just code everything in one sitting, basically, every feature that I want to, but this seems to be limited to kind of 2 or 3 variables. Would I just need to re-import the files and then recode them again, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, unless Sergio had an amazing workaround, that's exactly what I'd do. It doesn't take long to create those codes within EPPI-Reviewer, you know, create the coding tool and then set it up and then recode things. There is a cheeky way of being able to code them quicker. So if you already had it, like if you already have data already coded in a different tool, in different software, and you had a list of which items had received certain codes, you could, if I share my screen again, here we go. You could, you could, for example, say that you wanted to, you knew that these particular items needed to have the year 5 code, for example. You could select them, click on the year 5 code that you created, and then click on assign code. And that way you can bulk assign codes like a lot quicker if you've already got the data. But yeah, unfortunately, unless, like I said, unless Sergio knows a workaround, if you've already done the work elsewhere, you would then need to code it in EPPI-Reviewer itself to create the map. Yes.
Right. I mean, it's, you know, it's not a problem to do that. It's just, yeah, that's absolutely fine. And is it perfectly acceptable to kind of present sort of multiple links? Because normally I just have one big dashboard and have like multiple pages. So this looks like I might have to develop multiple HTML files if I wanted to submit to a publication, for example.
Well, there are a couple of workarounds there. One is that, I don't know if I've got, let me see if I've got. So one way that I worked around that was for this particular article, was a rapid review that I did, where I did create multiple maps. I created, so I created an EPPI-Visualiser, but I also created a map for each research question. And I mean, whilst this isn't perhaps the fanciest way to display it, I then uploaded them onto here. And I also, within the EPPI-Visualiser itself, I also then, I also then put an image of the map and hyperlinked it so that when you click on it, it goes straight to that particular map. So then, you know, if people were within this visualizer, they can then also get access to the map without having to worry too much about navigating different platforms. Another way that I did it was I uploaded it to something like Mendeley data. I uploaded all of my HTML files into that, as well as my coding scheme, you know, the raw data, things like that, and then provided that one Mendeley data link in the publication itself. And that's how I got around that. So yeah,
Really helpful.
Yeah, that's how I coped with it. I'm curious to know whether or not which way people find, I guess, most helpful. But if you've got them saved as a HTML file anyway, you can, yeah, you just use Mendeley data or any other repository like that, and then provide that one link, and it's all there for them.
And have you got some way of tracking that? So tracking the downloads of that, or I'm just kind of about developing something for some impact, because I'm always being asked about impact. What impact?
Ah, that's a good question.
So I used to use QR codes, but I was just curious to see whether anything could be built in there, maybe like a little QR code. So you could embed whether you could embed that alongside, I don't know, your.
I guess you could do that. I'm guessing, to be honest, I haven't looked back at my Mendeley data account for a while, but it's possible that it does track the number of downloads. I know that I'm pretty sure it's the Open Science Framework does. And you can also track things like if you uploaded them to, well, unfortunately you can't upload HTML files to ResearchGate, but you know, things like ResearchGate track impact as well. That's a really good question.
Okay, I'm gonna inject myself in here.
Do it.
So the EPPI-Visualiser is really new. We launched it this winter, and it's still moving really quickly. Actually, if you put it back on the screen, I can add a couple of things afterwards. But we have not included a system to record how many people are looking at it, but that's definitely something that we will eventually write for it. So it will then generate reports of how many people have been consulting, and I don't know exactly the detail of what the reports will include, but that's definitely something that we will do eventually. While the maps, the gap maps as single HTML files, of course, they go immediately out of our control, so we cannot really know how people will use them, and therefore how to measure the level of engagement. That depends on where they get uploaded and that sort of thing. But there's nothing preventing people from using the usual tools to measure the number of visits and the type of users and blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of thing that you could do with Google Analytics. And then I wanted to add for everybody that on Monday, a new version of this will come out, as well as a new version of EPPI-Reviewer itself. And the important changes for the EPPI-Visualiser will be that you will have the option of changing the logo on the top left. So to completely customize the view of that. You can see that it says the epicenter right now, but afterwards, yeah, everybody can put their own logo there. So to have a full customization of that. And then it will also be possible to browse through the single references and looking at the details of the single references without having to go back to the list and then choose another reference. So one can just go from one reference to the next. Right now, if Mel clicks on that, you will have next and previous buttons and that sort of facility that we just wrote the other week. So this, and in a future version, which is not very far, but might be a couple of months, we will also be able to offer complete dynamic maps on the fly to be done directly in the visualizer. So
like one of these?
Kind of not as feature rich because it's a very different application, but it will allow to create the cross tabulations within inner segments. And yeah, we don't know exactly how it will look, but the plan is there.
Yes, I did forget to mention that this is in alpha development, the EPPI-Visualiser, but I really wanted to talk about it. So yes, I apologize about that. But even though it is, you know, in its infancy, really, you can already do lots of things. So yeah. Okay, I'm just going to check the chat just to make sure there aren't any questions in there. Will, it's an interesting question. Someone's used to EPPI-Reviewer 4, Sabina, lovely to see you, and wants to know, will EPPI-Reviewer 4 still be available to use in the coming years? Now, Sergio, I think that's a question for you.
Yeah, okay, so the short answer is yes. as long as you still have access to Internet Explorer. At some point, Microsoft itself will decide to declare that Silverlight is officially dead also for legacy purposes, and might start doing changes that mean that nothing works with Silverlight anymore. But for now, as long as we have access to a computer that has Internet Explorer, then EPPI-Reviewer 4 will remain available. Not forever, but I guess for a couple of years at the very least. There's only one big feature that EPPI-Reviewer Web still misses at the moment. Well, there will be on Monday when we publish the next version, which is the meta-analysis, and we have big plans for expanding and changing how the meta-analysis works, and at that point we will make it surface into EPPI-Reviewer Web as well. And before that, we just cannot afford to close EPPI-Reviewer 4. But I guess between 2 and 3 years from now, eventually we will close it, because it's just twice the work. Every time we want to add a new feature, there's the possibility that we need to add it or to account for the changes in EPPI-Reviewer 4 as well, and that is just slowing us down. So eventually we will have to close it.
But Sabina, you know, EPPI-Reviewer Web, I was the same as you. EPPI-Reviewer Web was it felt like a big leap to make, because I'd always used EPPI-Reviewer 4. But, you know, there are some things in there that are just so much easier to use, I think, than EPPI-Reviewer 4. And hopefully, you know, with the introductory webinar in a couple of weeks, you'll start to feel a little bit more confident with using it. And you may find that you absolutely love it more than EPPI-Reviewer 4. You just don't know. Now, we've had another question, whether when you update your evidence gap map with new content, does it create a new HTML link, or can it be updated to the same initial HTML? Now, I think the answer is it does create it creates a new file. But you could technically, couldn't you, Sergio? You could upload, if you were uploading it to a CMS, you could upload it so that it had the same initial HTML, like the same URL link, right?
Yes, exactly. So for example, we at the Epicenter, we maintain that huge map of the COVID evidence as it comes out. And we decided to provide the link to all the previous versions of the map. But there's nothing forcing us to do that. What we could do is just replace the file with the new map. And new visitors will get the new data automatically and never really notice that something changed. Yeah, see, that's not a bad idea. That's one way around it. And of course, the other way around it is that you could just create an EPPI-Visualiser, and then it's already always updated live, which I love. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Sorry, I butted in there. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that one of the main reasons to exist, to do the EPPI-Visualiser, is that it has this, well, it's being built to show live data as it appears, as it is created. So, and of course, people can decide that the records that are still being worked on do not appear on Visualiser, and then just make them appear there when they are ready. Yeah. Thomas, please go ahead.
Yeah, I needed to unmute. Thank you. And thank you for the talk and the nice introduction. Especially the Visualiser, I think, is a pretty neat tool. I mean, to display the data and have it interactively. I was wondering, so to say, for the long term of the Visualiser. So how long will, once I create a visualization or such a visualization, how long will it stay online? And related to that, is there the perspective to get a persistent identifier to it? Or as I understood it, it's based on or you can create it once you have a subscription. If you cancel the subscription, will the visualization stay online, or will it vanish? Or what are the what are the conditions for it to stay online? Will it be available in 10 years from now?
Oh, that's a very good question. Sergio?
Yeah. Okay. So we haven't done very specific plans, but what I can say is that EPPI-Reviewer, once you have created a subscription for yourself, even if you never paid for it, so that applies also for trial accounts, it's there for stay, and the data that was created remains owned by whoever created it, and therefore they retain read-only access to it for as long as we remain in business. And that hopefully is going to be a very long time. And I don't know. Well, we have discussed whether we should find some way to make users pay a little bit for the computing cost of keeping the data online on the EPPI-Visualiser. We just ventilated the question to ourselves, but for the time being, we don't have any plan to make it subscription-based. So for now, the idea is that the data will remain available for as long as we remain in business, and there's a demand for the EPPI-Visualiser to be there. So that's the short question, this short answer, which means I'm not 100% sure, but for the time being, I don't see any expiration date on them to be enforced.
Maybe a short add-on. So is it also planned to update old visualization? So if I create it now and do nothing about it, will, I don't know, you ensure that in 2 years' time, if there's 2 new versions or something like that, that it still works as intended originally?
So the code that drives the visualizations will change over time, especially for the next 12 months. We're going to be very active in updating it, and the new features will automatically appear on all the existing visualizations, whether people are paying for an EPPI-Reviewer subscription or not. They get that, even if they don't want them. And that's because the architecture that drives the logic for the visualizations is common to all the visualizations that are created. Of course, every change that we will do will have to be backwards compatible. So that's a constraint for us when we are designing these things. So on the other hand, for updating the data that is visualized in there, that's up to EPPI-Reviewer subscription and having right access to EPPI-Reviewer. That may require money or not, depending on the licensing situation.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you for the explanation.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we've still got 2 minutes in case anyone had a last burning question. Otherwise, as I said before, you are absolutely more than welcome to get in touch with us. Emailing that episupport@ucl.ac.uk email address is by far the best to get a quick response rather than emailing my email address. But of course, I'll always answer anyway. Yeah, so if no one else has a question, then I will say thank you so very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope if you've signed up for the next webinar, I will definitely see you then. I have actually already uploaded the slides. I didn't want to tell you beforehand. I have uploaded the slides for this already on my website, but I will also email them to you afterwards, and I will upload the recording as well to our YouTube channel in case there's something you wanted to replay. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you again.